Hey guys, it's Michael Kummer here, and in today's video I want to talk about whether or not I think kids should be on a ketogenic diet. And before you say, well, you know, Michael, you're on keto, of course you're gonna say your kid should be on keto. Hang on a second. I'm gonna introduce a concept called metabolic flexibility, which I think is more important to the exact macronutrients and whether or not your kids eat a lot of carbs or a lot of fat. So hang tight. I encourage you to watch the full video, but before we get started, make sure you subscribe to this channel and you click on the little alert button so you get notified when I publish more videos like this. Now, anything related to kids is a little bit of a sticky topic, and so is talking about diet and nutrition. And if you put both together, it's a potential recipe for disaster, or at least arguments. And so I'd like to, instead of just telling you yes or no, I think kids should be on keto, I want to talk to you about what is the default diet of humans and give you some scientific background. Not too scientific, so don't worry, it's gonna be digestible for everyone, no pun intended. And at the end of the video, I think you can draw your own conclusions and take away what you've learned and hopefully apply it to your own kids and in your own family. Also at the very end, we'll do a little experiment. My 6-year-old daughter has agreed to donate some blood for the purpose of testing her metabolism to find out how flexible her metabolism really is. So stick with me until the end to find out. So let's talk about the default human nutrition, because surprise, surprise, it's not the standard American diet. If we look back at how humans have evolved over millions of years, then we can conclude that humans either got their food from the animals they successfully hunted and killed, meaning animal protein and animal fat, or from seasonal fruits, veggies, nuts, seeds, maybe herbs, maybe the occasional wild legumes or wild grains. But we certainly didn't eat any processed carbs. We didn't eat the amount of grains and carbs overall that we consume today, simply because that wasn't available in sufficient quantities. There was no farming going on up until about 10,000 years ago. So most of our calories we got from animal fats and animal protein, in fact. And so that's the default human diet, if you will, and that's really the principle of the Paleolithic diet or paleo diet. But how does ketosis and the ketogenic diet fit into that equation? Well, here is the thing. Humans didn't have a fridge back in the days. So if they didn't kill an animal, if they didn't find anything, maybe because it was winter or they lived in a colder climate, so there was nothing growing, then what happened? You know, where did we get our energy from? And the simple answer is fat stored on the body. There is an ingenious mechanism that the human body has, and that is it can convert energy from the calories we eat into fat, store it on the body, so then when we don't get anything to eat, we can leverage that fat and burn it for energy. And that's an incredibly important capability and ability to burn body fat. The problem is that most people, especially those who are on a Western diet, on the standard American diet, have lost the ability to efficiently burn fat for energy. And that's what we call an metabolic inflexibility, the inability to efficiently switch back and forth between carbohydrates and fat as a source of fuel. Now, let's ignore for a moment how our ancestors ate and how we evolved. Let's talk about how human life starts and what state the metabolism is in. And you might find it surprising that newborn babies, breastfed newborns, use fat as their primary source of energy. So newborns, breastfed newborns, are in ketosis. They are practically on a ketogenic diet, drinking breast milk, of course, but their body uses fat as its primary source of energy. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is brain development, because there are certain organs in the human body, including the brain, the heart muscle, that thrive on what's called ketone bodies. Ketone bodies are the metabolic byproduct of fat metabolism. So the liver can convert certain fatty acids, those molecules that make up fat, into ketone bodies, and certain organs, including the brain and the heart muscle and other cells, can use that as a source of energy instead of glucose, which is the metabolic byproduct of carbohydrate metabolism. And the reason why that is because if there are ketone bodies in the bloodstream, then the brain has twice as many calories available for energy versus if there are no ketone bodies, if it only has to rely on glucose. So the brain loves ketones, and newborns obviously grow their brains by leaps and bounds, and so the brain needs a lot of energy. Even today, in adults, the brain consumes most of the energy in relation to its size. And so if you feed the brain and other organs ketone bodies, they work better, more efficiently, and have more energy available at the end of the day. So babies are born in ketosis, right? So when do you think they switch from a fat-based to a carbohydrate-based metabolism? Well, unsurprisingly, when parents start introducing solids, Rice Krispies and all the good stuff, maybe formula, and I'm not blaming anyone for using formula, we've done it with our preemie as well. You simply cannot find formula that's not loaded with sugar. If you have to use formula to supplement or whatever the case might be, you're basically pushing your baby into a carbohydrate-based metabolism. That's just the way it is. So humans at a young age, likely when we introduce solids, switch over to a carb-based metabolism. And that's not necessarily always a bad thing. The key here really is to retain the ability to efficiently switch back and forth between fat and carbs in terms of usage and energy consumption. And why is that important? Well, there are a couple of reasons for that, and I'd like to drill into them and make sure you understand the importance of what's called metabolic flexibility. And so let's go back to our ancestors for a moment. So when they couldn't find any food to eat, when they couldn't hunt any animals or whatever, then they didn't starve, they didn't get hangry, they didn't get fatigued and dizzy and all the symptoms that we typically associate with, oh, I'm low on sugar because I haven't eaten in 2 hours. They got nothing of that. And the reason for that is because their body could immediately switch into burning fat, their own body fat that they've potentially accumulated from the last time they ate a lot, they found food. And so there is no hunger as we know it today, where feeling like hangry and irritated and all those things. None of that you will ever feel if you allow your body to use fat for fuel. And that's really the principle of the ketogenic diet, to make you fat adapted, to use fat for energy, so when you don't eat, in between meals basically. So that is called metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch back and forth. And most of us, and in particular our kids, have used that ability. That's why they need a snack 2 hours after breakfast, between breakfast and lunch, because otherwise they get irritated and everything. And then the same thing in mid-afternoon, they need a snack because they can't hold it until the evening because they are so hungry. If they were fat adapted, they would simply start burning their own fat, and none of that would really matter. So that's an important aspect, the metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch back and forth. In order to understand the problem with that approach is that constantly using carbs and glucose as the primary source of fuel, we have to look at very briefly how the metabolism works and what happens when you indeed eat carbs. So when you eat carbs, the liver converts those carbohydrates into glucose, into blood sugar. And so there is now sugar in your bloodstream at the end of the day, and that signals the pancreas to release insulin, which is a storage hormone that goes out, takes the glucose and tries to shuffle it into cells. So the mitochondria within that energetic powerhouse, the engine of the cell basically, can use the glucose for fuel, for energy, to do whatever the cell is supposed to do, right? So, and there is generally not an issue with that. That's how, humans were built, to do exactly that. The problem is when there is more energy, more glucose available than what cells need. So what happens? The insulin receptors of the cell say, I'm saturated, I don't need any more glucose, but there is still glucose in the bloodstream because we ate 200 grams of carbs a day, or 300. If you look at the USDA guidelines, the dietary guidelines for Americans, you're supposed to eat, as an adult at least, like 250 to 350 whatever carbs per day. And so with all those excess carbohydrates and the excess blood sugar, the pancreas keeps cranking out insulin to remove that blood sugar from the bloodstream. And if it can't do it, then what happens next is the liver converts that excess glucose into fat and stores it on the body. Remember, that's that ancient survival mechanism, or that ancient mechanism to kind of make sure we have energy for those times where we don't find food. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to see it, that never happens. Our kids never have to be hungry. At least most of our kids never have to be hungry. So whenever they need food, they get food. They never get to burn and use that stored fat that our body has put aside for times where there is no food. And so instead of using the body fat, we keep producing more body fat, and we keep storing more body fat, more energy basically, because there is nothing else or nowhere else that energy can go. We can either, obviously, we can burn it off, or your kids can burn it off. It can be used by cells, or it gets stored. And if you look at the current obesity and rate of overweight children, which is shocking, then you'll realize that one of the things that the kids' bodies are doing, they keep storing that fat that comes ultimately from excess carbohydrate consumption. And as the pancreas keeps cranking out insulin and the cells say, I don't need anymore, I don't need anymore, the cells become less sensitive or resistant to insulin. And those are the early stages of insulin resistance, leading to prediabetes and diabetes. And so that's the main issue with constant carb consumption, and not allowing your body to use its own fat for energy. And that's again where metabolic flexibility comes in, because the problem is, if your kids have been on a pure carb-based diet, a predominantly carb-based diet for a very long time, then the body does not know how to burn its own fat anymore. So even if you take away food, the ability for the body to switch over and start burning fat is delayed, or in some cases non-existent. So kids get irritated, they get hungry, they get cranky, they get dizzy, they get all kinds of symptoms because the body, and especially the brain, is not getting the energy it needs, because you're not feeding the carbs and the body cannot use the stored fats. And that's a situation you don't want to be in, because that always means if you're late for dinner or whatever, then we have to get something real quick. We cannot do it right, or we cannot wait because the kid needs something to eat, And that, to a certain degree at least, makes your life spin around eating and finding foods at certain times. What if we don't make it for lunch? What's gonna happen? We have to pack a snack. Well, what snack we gonna pack? Or let's stop at the drive-thru real quick. It leads to bad decision making and to bad nutrition at the end of the day if you're so reliant on getting food at regular intervals. If you're, however, metabolically flexible, then skipping a meal means nothing, because the body just uses its own fat for energy. Nobody's hungry, nobody's cranky, nobody's hangry. We just move on, and then we eat later whenever we get access to food. So the key takeaway here really is that it's not about putting your kid on a ketogenic diet where you count calories, you count macros, you make sure that you're getting 70% of all calories from fat sources, to test ketone levels and blood sugar levels, all of that. That's not the point. That's not the point at all. The point really is the crucial factor that you should enable your kids and yourself at the end of the day is to be metabolically flexible. And the only way to get to that point, if your kids have been on a standard American diet for a couple of years, is to start reducing their carbohydrate intake and replacing it with healthy fats. And by that I don't mean vegetable oils and seed oils, but healthy saturated fats, animal sources of fats, coconut fat, avocado oil, olive oil, those kind of things. And avocados and olives are not vegetables, they are fruits, by the way, in case you wonder, so that's why I mentioned them. But I specifically recommend not to use vegetable oils and seed oils. They are highly inflammatory, high in polyunsaturated fatty acids that are oxidize really quickly and cause more damage than they're good for. So my recommendation would be, and that's kind of how our kids eat as well, to reduce the amount of carbs, increase the amount of healthy fat. So basically substitute whatever you remove from a carbohydrate perspective and put in healthy fats. Fat tastes very good. Just to give you one example, if there are veggies or whatever that you want your kids to eat, make them in bacon fat or add bacon to the meal and they'll eat pretty much everything. So let's talk about how we eat and how our kids eat. Well, one of the things that we have decided on doing is, since my wife and I are both on a keto, paleo sort of diet. I'm more strict with my keto diet than the rest of the family, but we all eat low carb and high fat. And one of the things that we've done is we have removed everything from our pantry that the kids are not supposed to eat. So there is no candy, there is no cereals, no grains, legumes, no snacks, nothing that we would not want them to eat and that we don't want us to eat, that we don't eat either. So when the kids come and say, hey, I'd like to get something to eat, we say, well, go and find something, because whatever they find is good for them. It's typically high in fat and relatively low in carbs. Now, one thing I want to say is that we try to offer our kids a variety of healthy food sources. So we have different fats they can choose from, different proteins, different types of slower burning carbs. So we have vegetables, obviously, we have nuts, we have seeds, we have fruits, of course. Now we try to stay away from the high carb fruits like bananas. A banana for them is a treat. Like once every 2 weeks we go to Whole Foods. Well, we go to Whole Foods every week, but once every 2 weeks they ask for a banana and that's their treat. They're like in heaven because they get a banana, because banana at the end of the day is a wet bag of sugar. It has some nutrients, of course, but it's predominantly sugar. So we try to stick with berries, especially raspberries and strawberries, and those kind of fruits that have fewer amounts of carbs. But within that framework, they can pick and choose whatever they want to. And sometimes they eat more carbs than fat. In other cases, they eat no carbs, like when they have breakfast, with 4 eggs each soaked in bacon fat, and I don't know what they might have on the side, maybe a piece of cheese on the side, then there is pretty much no carbs in that meal. But in other cases, they have paleo pancakes that we make or that we buy in the store, or fruits, or maybe cashew yogurt, which is obviously a source of carbs. And that's fine. We don't restrict them artificially. We explain to them how we eat, why we eat, and how we do what we do. But within that, they make their own decisions, and they make good decisions. They've just learned from seeing, and by seeing what we eat, not by what we tell them, but what they see from us. But still, occasionally, once every 2 months or so, we have regular pizza. And last night was one of those nights where we had regular wheat crust pizza from a local pizzeria here. And we did an experiment because I wanted to find out if they have pizza at night, how would their metabolism be the next morning? Because if you're metabolically flexible, then what's gonna happen is you eat the pizza, the liver converts those carbs, and especially wheat spikes your blood sugar like nothing else. More than regular table sugar, believe it or not. And so my expectation was, and I saw this when I was wearing a continuous glucose monitor to see how my blood sugar would spike throughout the night, various spikes. And so my assumption was blood sugar would go up. At some point in the second half of the night, it would recover. And in the morning, they would be back at burning fat because their metabolism, I would assume, is flexible enough to use those carbs, recover, and then go back to burning body fat for energy. And so let's see if that truly happens. So in the next clip, you're gonna see my daughter doing a ketone blood test. She agreed to that. She wanted to do it, in fact, because she saw me a couple of times doing it, and we'll see what's gonna happen. 1.8, Mausi. Sehr, sehr gut. You're in deep ketosis. You ready? Ja, du kannst nicht. Nein, du kannst nicht. Kein Problem. Not as flexible as the kids, but still in ketosis.
Wait.
Now, as you can see, that is pretty amazing. Her metabolism switched back overnight to burning fat, and that's the position you want to be in. That's the diet, or the dietary framework, I should say, that you want to provide for your kids, so their metabolism remains flexible. They can efficiently use carbs when they eat carbs, and then switch back to burning body fat. That's such an important capability, not only to maintain your weight, of course. I mean, kids, well, our kids at least, we don't have a weight problem, fortunately, but the ability to use that body fat ensures that they are not hungry in between meals. Sometimes if we don't mention lunch or dinner, they would not even think about it, unless we say, hey, you guys want to come for dinner? And in some cases, they say, I'm not hungry. And if they're not hungry, they don't get any food. That's perfectly fine. And teaching them that ability and that knowledge at an early age is incredibly important, because by remaining and retaining that metabolic flexibility, you significantly decrease your risk. You virtually eliminate the risk of developing metabolic diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, of course, cardiovascular disease. All of those diseases that most people in developed nations die from at a way too early age are caused by the body's inability and the body's metabolism to function properly. That's the root cause. A disturbed glucose metabolism is the root cause of most metabolic diseases. And if you remain flexible and be able to switch back and forth between fat and carbs, then I can almost guarantee you're not gonna develop a metabolic disease. And so that's the framework that we've set out for our kids. It somewhat mimics the ketogenic diet, but it's not a true ketogenic diet in the sense that we give them 70% of that meal must be fat and 25 protein and 5% carbs. No, they pick and choose basically, but there is a lot of fat obviously, and there is lower amount of carbs, but it's not zero, it's not limited to 20 grams a day or anything. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. The important thing is they get the framework that retains their metabolic flexibility, and that's the key takeaway of this video. So no, you don't have to be on a keto diet with your kids, but I highly recommend cutting out those carbs and reducing those carbs to enable your kids to remain metabolically flexible. Now, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, this button seems to be working as well. And tell me in the comments, how are you eating? What do you think? Do you think that low carb or lower carb is good for your kids? Any questions? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.